Hello and good evening, everyone. I am so excited today for this masterclass because here's my very good friend who's coming today to host this masterclass with me. I am Laksh Mittal joining live from India, and today's masterclass is brought to you by Recurrent. Our vision at Recurrent is to onboard millions of users, millions of enthusiastic users to the Web3 revolution. And that is why we bring to you one of a kind masterclass series, transitioning into Web3. The world is leading towards a more connected ecosystem. And as time passes, different aspects around the world, different industries are coming together to build communities. And Web3 is all about communities. So the power of decentralization, blockchain, and the secret sauce, you. Web3 has come here to build the revolution which the world was expecting. Now, before we get started with our masterclass for today, let me give you a sneak peek, a little, something around what Recurrent does and what is Recurrent all about. Okay. So, as we all know, Web3 is a new internet, and it is meant for anyone and everyone who wishes to be a part of a transparent, efficient, yet autonomous ecosystem. This is where Recurrent steps in and helps event attendees discover Web3 opportunities like jobs, internships from across the globe at professional events like conferences, webinars, meetups, etc. To keep it very simple and a single line, Recurrent connects Web3 professionals to Web3 companies at Web3 events. Today we have 60 plus companies bringing you a plethora of job opportunities to apply for. We are also providing NFT minted certificates to all participants who will be attending our event live from our platform. So if you're watching the stream from any other platform like Twitter, LinkedIn, or YouTube even, right? Log on to Recurrent right now. Make your account, drop in your questions in the discussion room, and at the end, take this memory as a unique NFT minted certificate. For today's specific event, we have Uniform as our sponsor, and they are also hiring with various other companies at this event. Now let's move ahead and bring our speaker on board. Today's speaker is one of our close friends, which I made actually 2 days ago. Okay, and he's definitely planning to come to India very soon. Um, he's a person who started his journey with his love in computers, with his love in code. He started with his major in cybersecurity, information security, then moved towards understanding full stack engineering, and now he's a blockchain engineer running a very big company, Valist. So let's welcome Mr. Alec Wantoch from the USA, the CEO of Valist.
Hey, thanks, Laksh. Nice to be here.
Hi.
Yeah, super exciting for today's session.
Awesome, Alex. You sound very, glowing, amazing, and very energetic today. So let's get this
Thanks.
started. So why don't we start with this? Let's go ahead and tell the audience about something about your background. Like, how did you end up in Web3? How did you start your journey as a cybersecurity person from information, security, then full stack, like I mentioned, and then into blockchain? Like, how did this journey happen? Let's start with that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely always fun. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely was tinkering with computers since I was young, kind of thing. And yeah, basically around high school, I started learning how to code and stuff like that. Started with like C++ and things like that. Super different as far as like what you could do today, but yeah, it was definitely like kind of a slow burn for a while, and then, but yeah, I went through a like it's called a Votech high school, and
Okay.
basically where you would go half of your school day in one high school and then the other half in another school. That would be like there's a lot of stuff for like workshops and like repairing cars and stuff like that. But they had
Okay.
one for computers as well. So I was like, oh, let's try
Wow.
that. And so that's why I really learned how to code. And then in college, yeah, that's when I majored in cybersecurity and then changed it to computer science about a year and a half in. And then,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was like super deep in the full stack engineering, cybersecurity, more so on the application security side of things. So trying to build software that's really hard to hack. Essentially, it was always my like most exciting thing. Like I always wanted to build something that was really hard to. And I have a lot of hacker friends that are like on the other side of the coin, right, where they're offensive
Right.
security, and I've dabbled with that with them too. But and we could talk a little bit about that. But yeah, I always found myself still building stuff at the end of the day and trying to like take those learnings into the software that we build. And then so my co-founder and I basically met around 2014, and basically we've been working on projects together ever since. And a bunch of Web2 stuff with like back with like Meteor JS and like Angular and all those things, and like but like when reactive data was still becoming a thing, when React actually kind of hit the scene, even like stuff like that. And then yeah, so we like had built like social networks and stuff, and then so we always found ourselves like surrounding this like privacy and security related
Okay.
stuff with whatever we did. And then we worked at this company that around 2016 that really got us introduced back into like the Ethereum stuff. So because we had played with crypto before, like with Bitcoin and stuff, but there wasn't really much you could do with it. And then we discovered Ethereum, and that's when it was like really like, whoa, okay, this is really interesting. And then so we started working on all kinds of stuff with that. Once it clicked that like smart contracts were just programs
Right.
on a blockchain, and now it's like this global computer, that was like everything. And
Boom.
then so yeah, the everything about the wallets, that was where I really dove deep.
Right.
Because that fit a lot of the security stuff, and like building the wallet libraries were always super fun, and just like BIP44, BIP32, and like all those different things of like how the keys actually are generated across these different blockchains, and message signing and all that stuff, and really fascinates me. And then yeah, I joined this company Ethos
Oh.
that built one of the first universal wallets and universal blockchain
Okay.
APIs. And basically, yeah, it was like it supported like 300 different tokens, and this was back in like 2018 at this
Right.
point. And then yeah, so that was really when I made the full like I guess like 2016 is when I made the full transition in and was like, okay, this is awesome. But then 2018 was when it was really like, yo, this is like actually probably gonna be
A hit.
like the next wave. Like it's not just kind of like, like an experiment, or it felt like it was an experiment that was actually going somewhere, at least.
Okay.
And then that's when I was like, okay, you know what? I just graduated college at that point, and then it was like, okay, I guess I'm kind of like a crypto person now. Like I don't know,
Now,
just kind of
yeah, everyone's
what I'm
wagged me.
doing for a living now, and like, yeah, I got paid in crypto for like a year, which was really crazy.
Okay.
That was kind of fun. And yeah, just like all kinds of stuff. Yeah, really. Yeah.
Awesome.
That
So
was
see, from what you have already said, and what I know about you, what I have understood is whatever you have learned through life, let it be infosec, cybersecurity, or full stack, you have tried to use all of those knowledge and try to then build Wallace, right? Because
Mhm.
what I understand of Wallace is basically you have a software, okay, but you need to secure it as well, right? You
For
cannot
sure.
just publicly play around with it, okay, and that is where Wallace came into picture to secure software, but on the blockchain.
Right.
Correct? Correct. So why
Exactly.
don't we go about this? Like, what led to the bringing to the birth of Wallace? Like, what made you do that? What was
Sure.
that particular hit point, or what made you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess like as a quick thing too, what Valist does, great point. It's a Web3 native way to publish your apps, games, binaries, and pretty much any type of software. And it's essentially the concept of using your Ethereum keys as your developer identity. And now we used to use SSH
Right.
keys and PGP keys and stuff like that. But SSH has great adoption. PGP never really got the adoption it deserved. But nowadays, everyone's downloading wallets themselves and creating their own keys.
Correct.
And so Valist is essentially using those wallets to publish software with your identity of Web3,
Correct.
right? So then you can basically look up someone's ENS address and see all the software they've published, or you can look up a team's ENS address and see all the software that whole team is published. And so, yeah, it's essentially a way that we can completely get off of the Web 2 platforms like, GitHub, Versal, Steam is
Right.
a really big primary focus for us to get games off of Web 2 platforms and stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, as far as how we ended up starting the idea, so Valist itself has also evolved, but the very core of it, you're right, it has definitely been a culmination of all of the lessons that we've learned across the different
Right.
projects we've worked on. And so we kept running into the things of like, hey, like we're publishing stuff and yeah, we're still using this Web 2 and like everything's Web 3. And it was kind of this like ironic thing. And it's like, hey, okay, well, can we just see if we can publish a version of a binary? Like it was
Okay.
super simple. Like, can we just have version 1.0.0 and then upgrade it to 1.0.1 with a smart contract? Like that was
Right.
the whole, like, can we even just do that?
Like that
And
was your MVP, right?
that was the total MVP. And it was at HackaFest 2020. And we also, right before, we were like, you know what? Let's try an NPM package. And then we were like,
Wow.
yeah, okay. So then we published an NPM package into it. And then we fetched it
Okay.
with the NPM install. And then it was like, whoa, that worked. Interesting. So, and then it was just kind of like from there, like, okay, what else can we publish? What's going to be most beneficial for people to start with? And like, how do we make the interfaces easy? And then it
Right.
just kind of
It
went,
started rippling around, right?
yeah,
Step by step. Okay, no, that's very awesome. So, yeah, I guess you mentioned to me earlier when we were talking, right, that this idea came up to you in an hackathon where you were trying to understand or solve the problem. And certainly you build that hackathon idea to a big VC-backed startup right now,
Mhm.
right? So let's see if there is anyone who is currently, wanting to enter the Web3 or blockchain space, correct? So what are your, step-by-step procedures you think a person should do? Okay, like you did. You started from a hackathon and you ended up, making a huge company now, right? So a person who's wanting to enter into Web3, right? What all things should he keep in mind? What all projects he should try doing? And what should be the mindset of that person while trying out, developing in Web3?
For sure. Yeah. So when I started, it is a little bit different from what the ecosystem is now. And I will say,
Okay.
yeah, at least like with the hackathon stuff, I would say is the same. I would probably do the same thing. Like I would just keep going to hackathons. Each one, and I would particularly, yeah, like check out the ETH Global ones too. Each one
Okay.
of them seems to be getting more and more, there's more and more tech, right? And more
Right.
sponsors. And so there's more and more things to do and more tooling
More
available.
development to come.
Yeah. And then so each and every hackathon that is occurring, you have more and more stuff that you can do and more opportunities available and more companies there. This can also become a little bit tricky when they reach a certain point.
Level.
But,
Okay.
and that's often what we saw with Web 2, right? Like that kind of, just eventually everything became super corporatized. I don't think Web 3,
Right.
I think we have a long way to go to
It
get
has
there.
just
And
started.
yeah. But yeah, I would say like the best thing I would do if I were to like just have a total reset, say I just learned how to code, or I'm a
Right.
developer that's getting into Web3.
Let's say you just learned PHP, JavaScript, and you know the basics of Web 2. Now you're trying to enter Web 3. Okay, what are the 2-3 things you'd do?
Yeah, for sure, hackathons. I would go to a few
Okay.
hackathons, build a few things, and then from there, you're going to figure out what you're really interested in. And then
Right.
that's where I would really focus. I would only focus on the stuff that really pulls you in, especially because
Okay.
that's just how the best code. I don't know. I just feel like if you're passionate about it, it'll draw you, I don't know, in the right way. So I would just focus on the stuff that seems really interesting to you and just think about the things that you would like to see in the world and just try building a version of that. And even if it's a super extremely basic, like Valist was extremely basic when
Right.
Tachyon and Gabriel from Tachyon discovered us. And like it didn't have to be like the potential was there, and and then you just keep working on it and you just show people that, hey, look, I'm dedicated to this thing. Like, I
Right.
want to see this happen. But yeah, if it depends on what path you want to go. If you want to join a company, I would say that you're probably in luck, because there's an extreme amount of demand for particularly smart contract engineers. That
Okay.
is a very niche skill that if you already know a statically typed language and you already know like low-level languages, like say like C++ or something, right?
Okay.
Um, or any of them, C Sharp, Java, like really it's just like any statically typed language. Then you can pretty much learn Solidity in maybe a couple days, and then a few
Right.
months to get to a point where um,
Smart contracts.
you are really like able to do things securely and stuff. And obviously, it takes years to master anything, but like,
Obviously. Right.
but you could get pretty if you already have static programming language skills. I feel like you could translate that pretty quickly, and then you're in
Okay.
a pretty high leverage position as far as like your skills and the asymmetry of your skills to the demand for them. Um,
Right.
Full
Okay.
stack engineering as well, extremely, like if you can put together a DApp, that's like boom, like that's you're gonna get picked up pretty quickly. And then non-engineering stuff is also extremely important, and
Yeah,
really,
because of the advent of communities right now, right?
yeah,
Everyone wants to build a community. So yeah, the non-functional stuff also comes up.
exactly, yeah.
Right.
And just the I feel like Web3 is very much oriented around that, because now everyone could be a stakeholder in their favorite protocol, and that wasn't necessarily
Correct.
a thing before, right? So it aligns incentives in such a way that, yeah, your community can also become your marketing team, and they could also become your investors, and they could also become your users at the same time. But I also think that can get a little tricky as well. But so yeah, the non-engineering stuff is extremely, extremely important, and frankly, our space really needs a lot of work in the design spot. Like, we have an amazing creative director, I say, so we're okay on that
Okay.
front. But yeah, like definitely, like if you're good at design, or if you're really good ops person, or a really good um, marketer, like those are extremely, and marketing in the sense of like being able to truly understand your community and being able to actually
Right.
connect with them, and not just like shilling, right? So
Right.
those are really, yeah. And so I would just say, yeah, just go to the hackathons, go to the events, and then you're bound to find something interesting.
Even you can find a co-founder.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that actually. I've seen tons and tons of
Right.
companies that have gone to raise money and build teams and have awesome products, and that met at a hackathon. Happens all the time.
Right. So before we enter the the slides that you have prepared for the whole audience on
Sure.
explaining about problems in software distribution, one simple and amusing question, like what is the most amusing development that you feel has Web3 brought to the people? Is it like NFTs? Is it crypto? What do you think it is? Like, or what can you like think of in a futuristic scale that might just change the whole dynamic totally?
It's a great
You can
question.
keep it as short as possible. Like something which amuses you right now. Some company, some work, anything.
Well, I'm a little bit biased, so I would tend to lean towards software distribution there. But no, but I would say, yeah, some of the most fascinating use cases for me really are anything at the core of just enabling people to have more of a tangible say. And like DAOs right now are pretty disorganized. I think DAOs are
Okay.
very fascinating, and I have a lot of hope for them. I would like to see more efficient and more effective DAOs.
Okay.
I think we're starting to see new waves of different styles of DAOs. That's
Okay.
something I'm long term really fascinated by. And like, yeah, we have the idea of a community treasury with Valist and stuff like that.
Right.
So the people who are building on-chain rep can then coordinate around funding public goods, or funding, indie games or indie apps, stuff like that.
Correct.
But yeah, I think really, at the end of the day, um, yeah, that's the separation of state and money. I still find to be the most critical use case at the end of the day. Like the
Okay,
separation of, which is kind of the whole,
right.
yeah, the origination of crypto, I guess, is like, yeah, like now it's something that isn't necessarily controlled by a single entity or government or state. That I think that's very powerful
Yeah,
and dangerous in its own ways, but I think that's
definitely.
the most revolutionary thing that we've probably seen in money. Like,
Right.
yeah,
Okay. Like, I actually really love the point where, you stated that your own community can be your marketers, investors, users, everyone, right? So let's keep that, mindset in picture, and let's start with the slides that you have prepared for the audience, our community. Let's start with that.
sounds good.
Sure. Let's go ahead. You can share your screen now.
All right, I'm sharing. Nice, cool, sweet. All right, so I'm just gonna jump into it. Yeah, so that was a great transition anyway to the conversation that I would like to have here. So, yeah, we're gonna talk about Web3 native software distribution and the problems with Web2 software distribution. And yeah, what is Web3 native software distribution? Let's answer that first. Basically, it looks pretty similar to what some of the systems that you've seen in Web 2, only now there's a few things that you could do that you couldn't do before. So things like publishing, fetching, and secure updates are basically ports of Web 2, right? So being able to publish an app, being able to install an app, being able to update that app from both the consumer side and the developer side. Those are things that need to be built out. But then we have really cool things like Dow Coordination. So great segue there. So DAOs can now coordinate software releases together with Web3 native software distribution. So if you can imagine Ethereum clients like Geth, right, or Lodestar, for example, those could be coordinated by a DAO instead of one team, where now a team could publish a proposal for a release, right, and then thousands of people from around the world can build and test that themselves, and then they could also verify the release and coordinate the publishing together. And then we could also do things like software license NFTs. So instead of, you've probably activated a license code before where, let's say you bought a game or a piece of software and you had to enter the code. Well, now we could do that with NFTs instead. So instead of having to tie together all these random little systems, now people could just store the software that they own inside of their wallets. So lots of convenience there, portability and interoperability that we can do. But why do we need this? So I have a list here of a bunch of different software that are right now on Web 2 platforms primarily. So even things like Ethereum clients like Geth, Polygon's Boar, Rainbow Wallet, games like the Sandbox, pretty much anything that you can name in Web 3, we're still relying on these Web 2 platforms. And it goes all the way from critical infrastructure, like the actual blockchains that we run these systems with, to the end users' wallets that they actually consume and all the games that they play and all the dApps that they use. So this problem is pretty systematic throughout the entire ecosystem. So, and it's partially because the tooling hasn't really been able to do Web3 native software distribution until recently. And so we've had to kind of get by using these sort of systems. But if we do this for too long, it kind of puts us in a precarious situation. And essentially what we're doing is putting massive amounts of energy into decentralization just to re-centralize everything at the distribution level by publishing all this Web3 tech on Web 2 platforms like this. And some of the issues with this, and this is where some of the issues with Web 2 really come into play, are the risk of compromise, censorship risk, availability risk, and centralized payment infrastructure and high take rates. So I'll break this down a little bit as well, but risk of compromise, basically, if you have a single point of failure and you have a build server, for example, and you're doing this entirely on one Web2 platform, then if that platform gets hacked, now everyone downstream is also at risk, right? So, for example, if something were to happen to Geth on the Microsoft Azure Blob Store that they have it hosted on, if something were to be compromised at this level, anyone who's potentially upgrading their Geth clients from here are potentially installing malicious releases. So that's a big problem. Not only that, but censorship risk is available or is at play here as well. So if for whatever reason any of these platforms decided to not publish or host these protocols anymore, for if Microsoft launched their own chain or something crazy, and then now they were politically misaligned with Ethereum for whatever reason. These are just contrived examples as well, but we've seen many real examples of actual software being censored in countries from around the world, particularly with secure messaging apps, things like that. If you have software that allows, like Signal, that allows you to, or Birdie, that allows you to basically send and receive messages in a censor-resistant way, then you can actually, if you can't deliver that software, then you're kind of in trouble, right? So a secure messenger is only good if you can actually install it and use it, right? And then availability risk, kind of the same thing there, but not necessarily even malicious intent. So if the site goes down and now you can't retrieve the files anymore, then you're out of luck. And we've seen AWS go down. We've seen Google Cloud have outages. We've seen Microsoft Azure have outages. We've seen pretty much everything ever have outages. The only things that have far, far, far less, like to many orders of magnitude, is blockchains. And blockchains are extremely highly available. So we can rely on them to pin a lot of our infrastructure and global sources of truth here, as well as things like IPFS. So anyway, now we can move on to the actual monetary aspects. So let's say if you were publishing an app, right now you really only have a few options. Apple, Google, now Meta, Steam especially. And pretty much all of them take 30+% of your revenue by using their payment systems. And they're limited in functionality. You can't really pull out the SDKs. You can't really do much with them other than bundle your app, send it over to Apple and Google, and then hope if Apple publishes it. Google's usually pretty good about it, but you're still packaging it up, sending it to a company and hoping that they accept it. And then on top of that, they're taking 30+%. So it's out of control. So at the end of the day, they own your products, they own your users, and your users don't own anything, which is actually insane how this works. Like, I don't know how we have all accepted this. It's actually really insane. So they own your products because they have ultimate control over the distribution of your apps, games, whatever. They can control whether it's in the store or not. They can do whatever they want. They own your users because now the people who are publishing on the other side, you have zero connection with, and you have zero relationship with, and you can't really do anything to connect with them. And your users, at the end of the day, don't even own anything, because when they go and buy it from the store, they're just marking in a database that they own that item in their centralized organization. So the distributor still has ultimate control over that asset. So if you're buying an app or a game from Steam or anything like that, like at the end of the day, the distributor still has control over that. So it's kind of insane. So at the end of the day, Web2 platforms are really just monolithic, centralized, and expensive, and they're bad and costly brokers for everyone. But what can we do now that we're in Web3 that we couldn't do before? So like I said, at first sort of things start to look familiar. You port over common features from GitHub, Steam, things like that, like the ability to publish, fetch, and update your artifacts in a secure way, as well as things like managing team level and project level access control. So for example, being able to create an organization level account and then projects under that, and then having security around, admins versus publishers on individual accounts, being able to sort of manage a software project in a way that could be expandable, as well as it's flexible to pretty much any type of team, whether it's a small team or a giant DAO, essentially. But Valist is a set of tools that coordinate a bunch of Web3 protocols together to make publishing software in Web3 super easy. And so once we're ported over, now there's no more reliance on a single entity for distribution. So even if the Valist.io gateways run by Valist Inc. disappear for whatever reason, which they wouldn't, but if for whatever reason they do, you could still use the Valist protocol in a completely decentralized way. You can run your own Valist relays, you can run your own IPFS nodes, plug it into everything that you already use, like Polygon and IPFS. That's all it really needs. And then now there's no more reliance on whether or not a single entity goes down. And then you could also monetize software directly via non-fungible tokens. So if, for example, you're building a Unity game and you want to sell it for $20, now instead you would have to go through this insane process of and set up a whole bunch of stuff. Whereas now you could create a wallet, you could publish your software, and you could license it with an NFT and charge, say, $20, 20 USDC for the game. And then now someone could purchase that immediately. And then you can monetize this software directly instead of having to go through a centralized payment processor. And then, like I mentioned before, DAOs can coordinate releases. So pretty awesome for the super decentralized tech and, especially security critical software. And then speaking of security, you could also auto update and do a bunch of fancy stuff. Like, for example, if you had a bunch of smart devices plugged into each other and, someone published an update, then they would all be able to fetch the update, and only one of them would need to fetch to the internet, and then it could fetch that piece of update and send it to the rest of the devices within that network. So you could do all kinds of really cool stuff like this with these auto update mechanisms. And then, like I mentioned before as well, pretty awesome built-in public goods funding mechanisms. So the base protocol fee that powers the storage, the meta transactions, and everything that makes it basically free to use, it also has a community treasury that people who are basically publishing software and building on-chain reputation will be able to vote for where to allocate that pool to either public goods, open source, stuff like that, or indie game dev. So, if there's an up-and-coming indie game studio that the Web3 community really loves, the community could vote to go and help fund a new awesome game or something like that. Or, at basically plugging this revenue-driven system into donation-based systems like Gitcoin. I'm actually wearing a Gitcoin shirt right now, in fact. But yeah, we could plug these revenue-based public goods funding mechanisms into things like Gitcoin and Radical Drips and create this revenue-based regenerative system there. And so how does it work? Well, it basically ties together a bunch of different protocols, mainly IPFS, Filecoin, and Polygon. And then we're also integrating multiple blockchains. It's built to be multi-chain. And so essentially all the software is stored on IPFS, and then it gets replicated on a Filecoin for long-term storage so that it'll never disappear. And then IPFS is sort of that hot layer, the cache, and then we take smart contracts to manage the access control, so the accounts, the projects, and the versions under that. And then the smart contracts link the IPFS hashes to the designated versions, and then only the developers who have access can publish. Once they're published, then all of the clients are aware of the latest access control list and aware of the releases pretty much immediately as soon as the blockchain mines that block, right? So at the end of the day, it's a totally open source of truth for all of this software. And then Valist takes things like meta transactions with the open GSN network and things like magic email login to make it super seamless for developers. So you actually don't even need to pay gas to use this system because the protocol essentially pays for it itself. The only piece where the protocol even charges a fee is when software is being monetized. So how do I use it? Well, there's a few different options depending on your taste. So there's a web front end, a CLI, a GitHub action, and then we also have TypeScript and Go SDKs. So the web front end is super simple. It looks pretty much like a drag and drop system. You give it a version, and then you click publish. So this works really well for use cases like Unity games. For example, if you just go and export your build, and then you drag and drop your build folder here, that works excellently. If you want to get a little fancier, or if you prefer CLI, then we have a super simple CLI where you could do a Valist publish, and then you just give it the path and then the folder, and then it'll publish to that account and project at that version. And then we also have the ability to configure multi-platform releases. So for example, if you're a Go developer and you're writing an app for Mac, Windows, and Linux, and we actually have an Android client coming out here soon. So if you're an Android dev, this will be epic for you too. You could configure a valist.yml file to target multiple versions of that release for the designated platform. So you could say, hey, this is my Mac version, this is my Windows version, this is my Linux version. Oh, and here's my Android version as well. And then Valist will automatically understand that each file works with each platform, and then it'll be able to automatically deliver it to the designated platform during the download and install. So if you're using GitHub already and you're using GitHub releases, we have a GitHub action that makes it extremely simple to get started. So this is really awesome if you already have a publishing workflow and you just want to add Web3 publishing at the end. And it's a really easy way to get started, and then you can integrate deeper and deeper as you go. But basically, this is a quick example, just takes the IPFS binaries anytime a release happens, and then it publishes it on Valist immediately. So it's an extremely easy way to get started, and super simple to set up. And then we also have TypeScript and Go SDKs. Here's our TypeScript example. If you want to actually get into the nitty gritty and build things like auto update systems, or if you want to publish your own artifacts in a version controlled way. So if you're building a game and you want to have different versions of artifacts, you could also use Valist's SDK to publish those assets and link them in specific ways that you can then fetch later programmatically from within your app. So anything that needs access control project at the account, project, and version level, this is super, super effective. And then you can find it, valist.io. Our docs are super great, docs.valist.io. And then definitely come join our Discord. We would love to see you there. We have an awesome community of really talented people from all across the world and across different skill sets. So we have tons of engineers, tons of designers, tons of really creative people, awesome community. So definitely come say hi. Yeah, if you are looking to build anything, we're super happy to help as well. And you know, it's all about accelerating the transition to Web3 with Valist. That's ultimately our mission. So come show us what you're working on and see how we can help you along your journey. And then of course, if you want to check out the GitHub, literally everything about Valist is open source. So yeah, you can check out the way everything is built, from the smart contracts to the SDKs to the front end to the CLI to the GitHub action, everything. And then feel free to contribute. We love contributors, and yeah, we're looking forward to having you in our community. And yeah, thank you and good luck on your journey. And again, let us know how we can help for sure. But that's it for my my slides.
Hi, Valist. Wait, hi. One second, there's an echo. Okay, right. Hi, Alec. How are you doing?
Hey.
Yeah, that was a very like very detailed presentation. Like most of the questions which I myself had were actually sorted out pretty well. It is very pretty distinctly structured, okay, and properly made. So I love it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So I have a few questions around what actually you discussed, right, on software distribution, IPFS, securing, fetching, and even distribution, right? So let's go like this. So can you tell me a difference between a signed software and a licensed software? Like, is there a difference or are they similar?
Signed software versus a licensed software? That's a great question. So essentially, I'll start with the license. So the license piece really usually acts as sort of a gate between access to a particular software, right? So so if you purchase a license, then you have the rights to it. Essentially, is what that is kind of based in. But we also built it to be kind of generic, to where you can kind of use it for other things too. So like an in-app purchase or anything like that. Like that's also falls within that category. But yeah, that's kind of the point of the software license NFTs, is being able to do sort of a new form of DRM and a way to basically sell access to a piece of software. And right now, the way we do that in Web 2 is like these crazy DRM systems, and like this, and then or we just rely on things like our mobile app stores and stuff to enforce those kinds of things. But yeah, so that's what the software license NFTs try to cover, is that like purchasing flow and being able to like sell access to either your entire piece of software, your game, or parts of it. And then the signed software piece basically is a way for the developers to prove that that is the actual software that is coming from the right individual, right? So if, for example, I'm signing under Wantoch.eth, right?
Okay.
And I've told you like one-on-one, like, hey, this is my ENS address. And then I send that software to you, and then you could check that it was signed by my address, essentially.
Yes.
You would know that it came from me, right? And then if someone else on the internet was pretending to be me, and then it came from a different address, and it would have a different signature, essentially.
Okay.
And you would be able to prove that, hey, that's not Alec's signature. So it's almost like
Right.
they're called digital signatures, essentially, because it's actually like it would be like a way if I could sign off on it in a digital way that proves that I actually did that.
Right.
And so that actually
It gives
comes
you ownership, basically,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So
Okay.
that actually goes back to how the way wallets work too. So just a quick breakdown on that side too. So the reason why you don't want to share your private key with anyone is because that's what you use to prove ownership of that public key, right? So
Okay.
you generate a wallet, and essentially what it does is it creates this random block of text, essentially 256 bits of random data, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you use that you want to keep safe. It's essentially a password to your funds at the end of the day, but a very big one, and it took a lot of randomness to generate, so it's unlikely for anyone in the world to know it. And there's more entropy there than like grains of sand on the planet and stuff like that. So anyway, you want to keep that safe. And then what the wallets do is they take that private key, and they can generate a public key out of it, essentially. And it's just a math function that you apply to that private key, right? And it's called like modular exponentiation. I'm not a mathematician or anything, but basically, yeah, it's you just reconfigure some variables on this elliptic curve. Anyway, basically at the end of the day, you have this private string. You could create a public thing out of it, to where it's like, hey, I could share this piece. It tells you that it's linked to this key, but I don't have to share this piece. I could share the public piece with you. So it's almost like your mailing address to your house, right? Like you could share that, but letting someone into your house is a little different kind of thing. It's kind of a contrived version, but
No, correct.
And then so you can use that public key to encrypt the data to me. So if you wanted to like encrypt something to me, then you could take my public key and then encrypt it, basically use my public key as the password and encrypt the file with that, send that to me, and then I decrypt it with my private key, right?
Right. Got it.
And then the other way around, if I wanted to, send something to you, I would take your public key, encrypt the file, and then send it to you. You can unlock it with your private key now, right?
Right.
And then, so yeah, that's how that works. And then with the signing stuff, it's you flip that around. I take the message that I want to prove comes from me, and I encrypt that with my private key. And then now you could decrypt it with my public key and then prove that it actually came from me, essentially. So
Okay.
it's this really crazy way that to where it's like, yeah, like you could always prove ownership. But anyway, just a quick little breakdown there. Hopefully it's
No,
helpful
definitely.
to the audience.
You should send me that background that I asked you yesterday about, right? To me, via this process. We should see how this encryption and decryption works over there.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, there's some
Right?
websites too that you can play around with this. Let me actually tweet Knackle. It's kind of a weird, like, here, I can send a link in the chat too, but for anyone that wants to play around with this concept, there's this JavaScript library that has this website that you could play with, and it's tweet NACL.js for anyone who wants to Google it as well. You can actually play around with this website,
Okay.
and this is how all of the wallets work. It's different. It's not like Ethereum keys here, but it's the same concepts to where you can sign, you can encrypt data and stuff, and yeah, that's a really cool.
Right. Awesome. That's pretty great. So this is what brings me to the next question, because I have seen you mentioning about keys various times. Like in the beginning, also when you were trying to do your introduction about how you went from hackathon to the company, you mentioned about PGP keys, PKI keys, and all of that. And now also you mentioned about private keys and public keys. So could you tell me what are the different kinds of keys that are actually available on the ETH network? Only because I feel ETH is like the base of blockchain as of now,
Yeah,
right? So can you tell me what are the different kinds of keys over there?
for sure. That's an excellent question. Yeah, so that is I love that. So basically, yeah, it kind of asymmetric cryptography as a concept has existed for a while.
Okay.
And basically, it started off with something called RSA, which is basically multiplying a bunch of prime numbers to create that private key. Because it's hard to now figure out from the opposite, how do you get to that if it's a bunch of prime numbers too? So that's where it kind of originated. And then we figured out this way to do things called elliptic curves, which essentially uses a function, an algebraic function, to create a mathematical curve. Like if you actually picture a chart,
Okay.
then and you draw a curve on it, then there's a
Okay.
mathematical function to where you can basically draw a line through it essentially, and like you could take different points on that curve as your like public and private points on there, to where it's like you could give away these two dots on the line, but if you give away these, that's your private key. So anyway, we figured out these really crazy ways to do it to where now we have smaller keys with the same level of security, because now it's like a math function instead of just like this giant
Algebra
numbers
function.
multiplied into this like
Right.
2048 bit key. Now we can get like 384 bits to get the same level of security kind of thing. Don't quote me on that. I think that's about the same level, but I believe it's 384 bits of elliptic curve key is just secure as an RSA 2048 bit, but don't quote me on that. But I think it's around that. But so now Bitcoin came around, right? And there's this institute called NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology, and basically they define the cryptography standards for what the U.S. government uses, and really a lot of people just kind of follow those standards. At the end of the day, is like if so they came out with this standard called P256, which is basically this elliptic curve thing. And it's actually what's built into your phones. It's what's built into your credit card chips, your SIM cards, all that stuff. It's available pretty much everywhere, right? And like there's these hardware level accelerators now, like inside of chips. The SSL key, in your browser, when you look at the green log, a lot of them are P256 keys as well and stuff like that. So But Bitcoin, Satoshi did not, and the Bitcoin community did not trust that curve because there was this little shenanigans with this thing called dual EC. Basically, the government figured out a way to put a back door inside of this elliptic curve. And then, so now there was like this lack of trust of like, okay, well, if people are building backdoors into the actual cryptography here, do we actually trust that this P256 curve is secure? And we've since, everyone generally these days thinks, yeah, it's fine. But yeah, like there was this like little bit of modification to the Bitcoin curve. Instead of SEC P256 R1, it's now K1. So it's like a very slight tweak, but then Ethereum adopted that. And then everyone else adopted those curves. Like it was all, everyone in the basically Bitcoin-based and Ethereum-based blockchain used those curves. So, but they're not supported natively by the chips in all of our stuff. And that's why we don't have hardware wallets on our phones yet. And that's why we don't have like better hardware devices for this stuff, because they have to build custom chips, or they have to find vendors that have support for that curve that have since realized that cryptocurrency users want that curve.
Like ledgers, right? Hardware ledgers.
Yep, exactly. So Ledger figured out, hey, we could go and buy this chip that has these curves. We can make a hardware wall out of it. And then they were like, yo, cool. And they did a great job. So yeah, and then so that's kind of the basics there. And then there's other more fancy curves like Edwards curve, where it's Ed 25519, things like Stellar, and I think a few other chains like non-Bitcoin and EVM based ones use that. It got more popular for a few chains. I think Monero, something like that. Yeah, but that's another type of curve. And then Ethereum is actually going to change curves as well.
The merge.
So yeah, we're going to like BLS and stuff, and for the signatures, and so that's going to require a different curve. But yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.
So like that's pretty fascinating as well, right? Like trying to make things more secure in the same place, but making it more distributed to a lot of people. Correct. So this actually, by understanding how you explain the curves, and there is a trust revolving behind this, right? So I was going to some article around, on software distribution only, where there, I guess someone from Valist only mentioned there is something called as a chain of trust, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So what do you think about, what is chain of trust? Like, would you tell us a little more about that? Plus, how is Valist bringing that chain of trust transition from Web 2 to Web 3? So
awesome.
Let's go with that.
I love this question. Yeah, I love all the security based questions here. That's awesome. So the chain of trust basically is how our current internet works. So back to that green lock, right? So maybe I could even share my screen here as well. But yeah, if I let me pull up this thing real quick too. Maybe this will be a little bit more helpful to visualize it. But I could actually pull up an old slide that I put together a while ago. Okay, yeah, found it.
Oh.
Boom.
Let's just let's just share the screen.
Cool. All right, I just shared this here.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, sweet. So this is basically how the current internet works. So if you look at the green lock in your web browser next to your URL, and then you click on it, and then you click on like connection is secure, and then certificate is valid, you can pull up the actual certificate that this website is looking at. So basically the way it works is there's these root certificate authorities, and basically 3 companies in the world have a 90% market share here. where essentially they are the root of the system of trust. And then it's back to the digital signature stuff here. So the root certificate authorities, basically folks like Amazon, DigiCert, and Cloudflare, they all have their own roots, right? Apple, Google, gigantic companies have their own roots, and then any company that you could buy certificates from either have their own root or intermediate certificates. So if you go to Namecheap and you buy an SSL cert from them, or you go to GoDaddy and you buy an SSL cert from them, this is basically what is happening at the end of the day. There are roots at the very beginning of this chain of trust that we just trust because they are large organizations that have good security. So they basically create a bunch of private keys, and they actually do this in hardware a lot of the time. So, or most of the time, at least they should be doing this in hardware. They generate a bunch of hardware keys, and then they keep them offline. And then they actually sign a bunch of intermediate certificates that they actually use on a day-to-day basis. So they have these root private keys that they generate, and then they use to generate intermediate private keys, which are basically like buffers, and then they keep the root offline. Because if you lose the root, that is the worst possible thing. So whereas if you lose an intermediate cert, then all you have to do is sign another one off with your root, right? So say if my intermediate cert got hacked, right, and now someone is issuing certificates on my behalf, then I could just take my root back online real quick, sign a message that says, hey, this other cert, kick that one off. This is the new cert you want to use. And it's basically like you're expiring the other cert and you're issuing a new certificate. So that's how that works. And so we have this buffer layer here of intermediate certificates that we can use sort of as like a defense layer. And then those are what sign off on your certificate that you buy for your domain. So Valist.io, right? Like we're issued that, and then from another intermediate cert. And then, so we use Versal and Cloudflare as a combination. And then basically, so they sign off certificates for Valist.io. Or anyone who wants to create a website, they could request one from Let's Encrypt. These are also roots and intermediate certs that you can request. And then the leaf, and at the end of the day, is what you're installing onto your servers. And that's what gives your server and your domain the green lock at the end of the day. And that's what the client is talking to. But the problem with this is if I get your cert, now I'm you. So that's like me getting the private key to your website, essentially. Now I'm just you. Or if I attack, so it's broken there already. And then if I attack this intermediate cert, now I can issue a new certificate that is also pretending to be you. So I could actually, not only that, I can pretend to be Google.com. So if I hack any of these companies, I can now issue genuine looking certificates that will show a green lock and that people will be able to think is Google.com if I were to hack one of these. And so we're basically relying on the security of all these companies. And it's not like blockchain where the more nodes you add, the more miners you have, the more stakers you have, the more validators, the stronger it gets. It's the opposite. It's like if you hack any of these companies, now the whole system, so it's just the weakest link that is now there. So
it's strong.
Right. And now with Web3, with DAOs and stuff, we have this multiple points of accountability factor. Whereas now this, in the traditional system, this is like Cloudflare or Amazon or any one of these organizations. We trust them, we hack them, the whole system is screwed, right? Whereas with Valist, now that we have Web3 and DAOs and communities, like we can have so many different verifying checks. And now a DAO, like I said before, if it's a really security critical thing, you can make it multi-sig to where now 4 out of 7 people need to sign off on it, or 51 out of 100 people need to sign off on it, or stuff like that, to where now you can basically configure different levels of security, and it can actually get
Okay.
stronger as more people are involved instead of the opposite where it can just get riskier. So yeah, it's pretty
Okay, that sounds very interesting actually, right? Because we need to see. It is okay to say that we are trustable, but you should actually show it as well, right? Which actually
exactly
comes with Web3. Maybe not with Web2, but it comes with Web3, I suppose.
right.
So let's move ahead. Okay, like my part of questions are actually done. Let's see what the recurrent community has brought for you. Okay, so let's have the first question which the community has for you.
Sweet.
Okay. Yeah, I seen there's a lag. There's no big difference. Okay, yeah, I actually understood, a similar pattern here where, there's a chain of trust, there is security, how, we can publish, fetch, and even, distribute our whole audience, right? Like, that's there. So tell me this, like, there's something called as hashing, right? Like hashing the key in IPFS, right? So can you tell me how does hashing help in IPFS address? Oh
Totally,
yeah, that's
totally. Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, hashing basically is a way that you can have a fingerprint of a file.
right.
So if I, it's basically a math function, another math function that has one input per one output, essentially. So it's a pure function in that, like, if I were to pass in the same exact data, I should get the same hash every time, right? So
Oh,
um, if I have an image, for instance, that I took on my phone, I could create a hash out
okay,
of it. And then I could send you the image and the hash. And then you could check, you can run the hash function yourself against that image to see if it's been modified. And if one
okay,
bit, like literally one or zero that's changed inside of it, um, then it's a completely different hash at the end of the day. So um, it's this really unique way to then represent a large file as a really small string and then guarantee that that string only represents that file, right? So
right.
um, it's kind of like, and it's not reversible. So you can't
Oh,
go from a hash back to the file, right? So it's a
okay,
one-way function. And then the way IPFS does this, I guess to elaborate a little bit more on that first, um, another example is,
Alec, let's dumb it down to a little
yeah, I
more.
was
What
just
is
about to say, yeah,
IPFS?
let's back before I go further. Let's do a few more real world examples. So if I'm sending you a message over the internet that
Right.
says, um, I am sending $20 to Locks, right? Like, and then um, it was intercepted now in the middle to say $200, right? How do I
Okay.
know that the original message I sent was the correct message at the end? So what I could do is I could take the message that says, "Hey, I am sending $20." I can
Okay.
hash that, and then I could also sign it as an additional. And signing, actually, you are signing the hash, so that's kind of a good
Okay.
pullback. So you could actually take this message that I'm sending to you. I can hash it, and then I can
Encrypt
send
it
you the
basically.
message, and then I could send you the hash, and then you could
Okay.
take my message, run the hash function against it, and if the hashes match, then you know that
That
message
you have
has
sent
not
it to
been
me.
modified, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay. That sounds good.
yeah. So it's a one-way fingerprint essentially. So that's how you could think
Cool.
about it. And then if anything changes, like one single binary bit changes, then the entire output looks totally different. So it's very easy to tell whether or not it's been um,
Modified or not.
modified or not. Yeah.
Okay.
So
That sounds amazing.
yeah. And then now the way
Let's.
IPFS does this
Mm-hmm.
is it uses the hash as the URL for the file.
Oh.
So instead of Web 2, where it's location based and you're doing based on the path on the server. So it's like if I go to myserver.com/some folder/some file, right? Basically, you're asking, hey, do you have some folder in the root? And then do you have some file inside of that folder? And then it has to look up that path. And if it has it, awesome. If it doesn't, you're going to get a 404, right? Or you
Okay.
can change the links. You could change the paths, like everything like that. So it's location based. And so IP addresses correspond to a specific router, essentially. And then, so it's all location based. And then domain names point to IP addresses as a way
Okay.
to like now find that. So you don't have to memorize the IP location of everything. IPFS does it totally different, to where it's content based, to where you're looking for the actual file itself. You don't care about where it is now. You don't care if it's on /my folder/my file. You don't care where it is,
Okay.
as long as you have the file and you know the exact hash of the file that you're requesting.
Right.
So basically, IPFS stores everything that way instead of
Oh,
by paths. It stores it by hash.
right.
So now I can upload this image to IPFS and I get the hash out of it. I could send that hash to you, and I don't even need to tell you where it is on IPFS. You could just say, hey, who on the IPFS network has this hash and has
Right.
the actual file that corresponds to this hash? And then
Okay.
it basically asks the whole network, who has this? Who has this? And then whoever has it sends it to you directly. So it doesn't matter about the location of the data anymore. It just matters the data itself. So that's why
The data.
Web3 makes it
Right.
so much easier to do the global stuff, because you're just fetching what's nearest to you and whoever has it, not going to specifically a region that's
Or a
nearby,
specific
right?
area. Right.
Yeah. So that's kind
Okay.
of the basis of it for IPFS.
Okay. Awesome. Let's move ahead with the next question. I guess which the community has brought for you on the
Sweet.
Ethereum.
Sweet.
Let's have the question.
Cool. I see one for, are there any alternate decentralized cloud infrastructure for hosting dApps? Yeah.
Right.
Great question. So definitely there's Valist now. And then we also have
Okay.
some awesome friends at Spheron. They focus a lot on the web stuff as well. Fleek are really good alternatives. But yeah, Valist is definitely towards that category as well, to where plug it
Right.
into your existing infrastructure and you can host dApps or any types of binaries. Yeah.
Okay. So to be very honest, um, go with the best possible answer that you have. How decentralized is Web3 now? What do you think?
Whew. Yeah. As a whole, not super decentralized yet. The tech is by principle, but by implementation, I think a lot of companies are taking too many shortcuts because it's a challenge too. You want to get to market, you want to get your product out there, but you
Right.
also don't want to sacrifice too much on the decentralization side. So a lot of folks are still using basically like Web 2.5 type of approaches to things, where basically they'll have like APIs that do everything for you and they make it really, really easy. But then they're abstracting away all the stuff to a point where you actually can't then go and, like, if that API goes down, you can't do anything anymore. And so that's essentially like Web 2.5, I would say.
Right.
And then, so pretty much every dApp or app or everything that you see right now is hosted over some sort of Web 2 platform. So it's pretty centralized on that side. But the actual blockchains themselves, like Ethereum, the larger ones are, I would say, the most decentralized things that we pretty much have, at least. Like, people could always make arguments it could be more decentralized, and for sure it always can be more and more. But when you compare it to what we have in reality outside of Web3, like, yeah, it's definitely awesomely,
It's
yeah.
moving
So
towards this, I guess, right?
yeah, I would say the networks that are underlying the stuff, the larger ones, and really like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Polygon, are more on that decentralized side. Ethereum and Bitcoin, I would say, are pretty much still the like total winners there, of like what the most decentralized protocol. Oh, and then IPFS as well by
All
by
right.
its nature entirely. So yeah, but then all of the apps that we're using are usually some centralized interface, I think, at the end of the day. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds amazing. Let's go to the next question. I guess you've already spoken about this. How to avoid a single point failure in Web3, right?
Yeah,
But let's do what just give a simple brief around this so that whoever is asking this they can know again.
for sure. For sure. So yeah, again, I would just be really mindful of what protocol you're using and like looking through the docs and just trying to be very aware of the architecture and how it's like what sacrifices it may or may not be making on the centralization side of things. I if they're usually hand wavy about it, I would say there might be some sort of centralization points there. Or if the only way you can access certain things is through an API, I would probably
Okay.
double check as to like, hey, like, am I using this because it's decentralized, or am I using it because of some other things? Because there are still very much products and use cases where centralization is needed, and like, I definitely just want to be clear that like, yeah, that centralization isn't necessarily evil. But we could decentralize a lot more stuff essentially. But
Right.
yeah, if you're using a use case where you do need some sort of trust or decentralization, I mean some sort of centralization, um, then that's fine. But that's generally my litmus. If I can only access it through an API and it's a centralized API, and I can only do things through API keys, and if the payment system is centralized, then it's probably like a Web 2.5 thing. If you see that there's SDKs that you can plug into your own infrastructure and that you can run your own version of it and you can like get
Okay.
the same thing that they're providing from their hosted service, then I would say it's decentralized. And I think the graph is an excellent version of that. So
Oh.
like for example, the graph.com is their managed service, but then you can always run your own subgraphs and you can always host your own,
Wow.
and you can get the same data that is being returned from the managed service. Valist, we've designed the same way.
Okay.
Valist.io, you could always get the exact same data if you run Valist on your own machine. You plug it in your own Polygon and you plug it on your own IPFS. It'll be able to do the exact same things that Valist.io is doing. So
Right.
that's kind of generally my approach.
Understanding around that.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that sounds pretty simple as well, right? Despite having everything centralized to one area, we can try decentralizing it to many subsets so that
Hmm.
the single point failure can, get diminished, right? Like it can become more negligent, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
that sounds pretty well. I guess we have one more question from the community. So, how secure are actually, the API calls in blockchain? Like, how secure do
Yes,
you think they are?
that kind of touches back on what I was saying earlier as well. So it's if you're hitting an HTTP endpoint through an
Okay,
API, you are trusting that endpoint at the end of the day.
right.
Um, so things like RPC providers, for example, they're very useful and like they're definitely like are necessary for the ecosystem.
Okay,
But yeah, like it's definitely better to run your own nodes. And yeah, at the end of the day, if you're hitting an HTTP endpoint, that's a centralized server. Like even with Valist.io, like just to be very clear
right.
about that, like Valist.io is a Web2 gateway, but it's a gateway, not the
Okay,
whole service, right? It's a gateway to the same thing that you can get from running it yourself. If you go to the GitHub, you run it,
okay,
like it's the same thing. We run the same deploy commands that you would run, essentially,
right.
right? And we plug it in the same data sources you would plug it into. So um, with that, it's like, okay, you can run your own version of Valist and verify whether or not Valist.io is telling the truth. Um, and yeah, but like if you're hitting Valist.io, you are hitting our infrastructure that we ran for you for
Right.
ease of use. But then, yeah, so I would just say, yeah, it depends on what stage you are in your project and like what your trade-offs are, and then like how easy is it for you to then migrate that API away to your own self-hosted or fully decentralized version of it.
Okay.
Yeah, but
No,
yeah,
this
they're
sounds amazing.
just as secure as Web 2, I would say, if you're hitting an endpoint like that. Yeah.
No, this sounds amazing. Like, definitely this adds a lot of value to everyone who's, actually trying to listen to us right now. Like, you don't even know, I'm getting so many messages right now that, this is going great. This is so much value addition to
I
what we
hope
didn't
so.
know
Yeah,
about,
that's awesome.
like securing stuff. Okay, see, everyone knows everything is hackable, right? But you should be mindfully aware of it, right? And definitely develop things around, like you're building Valist now, so you should know how secure you can be with your softwares even, right?
For sure.
So tell me about this. Like today, I feel it's the session has been pretty interactive, pretty informative, pretty like amusing. I feel in some way because there are various things which I myself thought would be like could happen, but I actually seen those things already happening, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think? Like how was the session today? Any thoughts around this?
Yeah, no, this is super fun. I love this. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And to the audience, definitely, yeah, like, yeah, however Recorum and Valist could be helpful for you and your journey, definitely let us know. We're very much excited to be a part of your journeys and help any way that we can, for sure. And yeah, definitely, it's been a great time, and definitely, yeah, super excited.
No, like yeah, like that's definitely like we should definitely add value because see somewhere like you said, everyone's on the brink of becoming Web 2.5. We are not really towards Web 3 right now, right? So
Hmm.
we as Recrum as well as Wallace should definitely bring more sessions like these again and again to educate the audience about what all things can actually be done around this because
For
it's
sure.
not only just about the money that's there. It's about developing, bringing new standards around, getting things solved for people, right? So I
Absolutely.
guess that solves everything that we spoke about today. Correct. I hope you didn't get bored out of what we discussed because it was very informative, right?
For sure. Yeah, no, I'm glad we got pretty deep on the security side too. I think that's generally something that we used to talk about a lot, and then now moved more towards the sort of the pain points around like, hey, it's like they're
Right.
taking a bunch of your money essentially too at the end of the day, right? Like everyone pretty much like, hey, like, but it's always fun to go back to the fundamentals of like wallets and just how this stuff works and like how people can
Right.
protect themselves better and just yeah, definitely. And honestly, I still think that the Web3 space has a lot of work to do in that side. Like for anyone who's working on projects right now on wallets, like I would definitely encourage like designing it for your grandma. Like definitely like these things need to be very usable and very secure without necessarily trading off for the ease of use aspect, which is a hard thing to
Okay.
do. Like I know this as a security person that like ease of use and security kind of are at tug of war with each other.
Okay.
The more it's like when if you have 100 locks on your door, right, and you're going to leave the house and you have to unlock 100 things, it's kind of a pain, right? Like
Right.
you have to
Right.
balance like how many
It's like a
locks
Tom and Jerry
versus
gate.
how
Have you seen
quickly
that
and how
episode?
often people are opening that door. You know what I mean? So, um,
Right.
yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff that we need on that side. But
No, like I was saying, it's like a Tom and Jerry gate. Have you seen that episode where this Tom actually unlocks so many gates to just get past through it?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
We actually need to dumb it down for a lot of people around there who are trying to, transition into Web3.
Hmm.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so this brings, to the last segment of, our whole masterclass that we had today. So what do you think? Like, how has it been with you in experience, like, what is your experience in working with Requiem? Like, how do you feel? How did we plan this out? How it turned out to be? We have many more events also coming in the next year, coming weeks, right? So, how is your experience? Like, would you like to say tell something around that?
Yeah, no, this is awesome. I think the combination of events and recruiting, I think, is an extremely insightful thing because what we were talking about earlier with the hackathons, and just sort of that being a really great way to find opportunities on both sides of the coin, right? Like our investors found an opportunity by going to this hackathon and seeing the results, right? So it's like, as well as us. So I do think that combination is very insightful, and I'm very much looking forward to future events, and definitely, we're probably going to be scaling the team out. Here in a maybe about a month or two, a little bit on the engineering side. So yeah, that'll be really fun. And then we definitely want to bring some of our other hackathon stuff here as well, and just some of the events that we want to do. So yeah, it's been fun.
Nice. That's brings us to the end. So any last thoughts, like to the audience who are trying to transition into Web3, or anything that you learned that you would want a person to know about? Any last thoughts? Anything on that?
Sure. Yeah, I guess the biggest thing that I could think is to just keep going after what you enjoy within the space, and then you're just bound to find friends that are like-minded and passionate about similar things, and you're just bound to. That's ultimately what my co-founder Zach and I always did. We just kept trying shit. We just kept going and going, and just kept doing project after project, knowing when something is worth putting down, and then when and then when to stick with something, right? Like with Valist, when we found this, it was like, you know what? All right, we got to stick with this for sure for the long run. So I think that's the best possible thing I could say, is just like keep doing what you're interested in. That is the most powerful driving force, is like, if you're actually interested in doing something, your brain will just like let you do it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy, right? So
it will not feel like work, basically. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Now caveat there too. There will be times where it very much is very like, you don't want to do this, or it's very tough. But I think at the end of the day, with all of this, as long as you're, I guess, like, also the work itself is one thing, but then the results and what your impact that you're aiming towards is another thing. So I tend to try and like stick really with that mentality of like what the impact and what the results are going to be. And then the work is just continuous iteration, right? Like that's just the process, right? And so it's like, sometimes it's a little harder, sometimes it's like really easy, but at the end of the day, focusing on what the fulfillment part of it, the fulfillment gives you far more dopamine and stuff than just like whether or not you're simply happy about doing it or not, like whether or not you're excited. Like the fulfillment of it is much more powerful. So I think that is the one to focus on. And then, yeah, just what do you want to see in the world? What kind of pain points have you encountered as you've been transitioning into Web3? And just keep noting that. And if you've come across a problem more than once or twice, maybe that's something you should try working on. You know what I mean? So I would just say, just keep doing stuff, keep putting things out there.
Keep iterating around what you have fun in, right?
For sure. And yeah, have fun is like literally the most important part, because then it's like, that's what's going to drive you to the really interesting stuff. And that's what's going to make you think really deeply. And your best thoughts, often happen when you're like walking outside and like, it's like, wait a second. And those are the things that are really coming from all the like passions. And so, you work on something that you're wanting to like, that you're excited by, I think is the biggest thing. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Alec, for joining me today. I really, like learned so many things. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you very soon. Okay. Maybe next month, maybe next year, whenever it's possible.
For sure.
Right. I really hope, whatever we are building in Web3, it actually adds value to whoever's around there. Let it be not even, techies or, developers. It should be everyone around the globe. Right.
For sure.
Today was great. I really feel, today was something I really connected with you on a better level, I feel, while understanding even the technical part. And last again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Alec.
Thanks, everyone. hope you have a great rest of your day. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you soon. I'll
Sure,
leave you
we'll
to
see you soon
the
next week.
reform fan. Sweet.
Okay,
All right.
bye-bye.
All right, fam. Cheers.
Okay. I'm sure, like all of us had fun and enlightening experience in today's masterclass, right? And it was really great for seeing so many people showing active participation during the event. I'll be pretty honest, like all those things which Alec actually, brought into or explained about, somewhere I really connect with them because I'm understanding them on a personal level as well. Like all of us use different websites, right? And the green log thing, the security thing, all of that that Alec actually mentioned is something all of us can already relate to. So we at Recordum, give a huge shout out to Valist and team, which is a Web3 native software distribution app and marketplace. And it definitely looks forward to revolutionize the way we operate Web3. Okay. Before coming to the end, I would really like to, congratulate everyone who has stayed from the beginning till the end. And I'll remind you again that please drop in your NFT wallet addresses on the Equerum chat, and you'll get a unique memory of today to remember how Recrum and Wallace added value to your knowledge in knowing about software distribution. Now, you all must be wondering, what's next, right? Before going to that, I'll again like to thank our, sponsors for today, Uniform. And they're a great company currently right now. We have more than, 200 plus jobs currently available on our platform with Uniform, Wallace, and many other companies hiring at this event. And this event would be live for another 1 week. So if you have by any chance missed to see it live right now, you have an opportunity to see it throughout the week again. Okay. So coming back to the point that what do we have for next week? So definitely next week we have various other speakers coming with various other topics, different masterclasses on everything related to transitioning into Web3. Let's hope you all subscribe in again, join in through the Recurrent platform, log on to there, and create your account, drop your questions, ask us what you want. What is the next topic you want us to discover and talk about? Any person you would want us to, bring in for our next masterclass? Please let us know how it is and who do you want us to, host. We'll definitely bring you more events, more jobs from various other companies and Web3 professionals. Thanks a lot. This is Laksh Mittal and signing off from India.